Hey everybody, it's Kennedy Hawk and Hone from the MCM Podcast. We are here again to continue our Marvel Champions playstyle video. So how's it going, Hone?
It's going all right. I survived a hailstorm in Austin, but house is still standing.
Survived is a strong word.
Survived. Yeah.
Well, today we're going to pick up the pace and talk about tempo a little bit. So last week's episode we talked with Char about the control playstyle, which was more of a build until your board state feels inevitable playstyle. But today we're going to be talking about tempo in Marvel Champions. So it'll be about incremental damage and maintaining control over the game's pace. Unlike rush strategies, which aim to end the game early, or control strategies, which focus on reactivity and setting up this board state, we're going to seek to establish a steady flow of actions. Actions that develop our board, that maximize the value of our resources, and maintain flexibility to respond to the changing threats that come out of the villain deck. So, let's get underway talking about tempo. I forgot last time to put up our cool graphics. I have to do that this time for the recording. It's really important. There we go. On your left, tempo. So, when we did our 3 playstyles video, we talked a lot about these 3 playstyles: control, tempo, and rush. And talking with lots of people online since then, these are really sort of like things on a spectrum of risk tolerance, from things where you're very risk intolerant in control and you want to mitigate all the risks, to where you're very risk tolerant in rush, where you basically don't realize the risk exists and you just go face. And this is kind of that middle point in the spectrum. I know the graphic we had showed more of a meta circle, like a PvP card game. This isn't exactly that. We're not saying that control is better against tempo. That doesn't make sense. It might against a villain deck, but not against or between the decks themselves. But in general, we said this is all about calculated risk. When do I need to prioritize threats that come out of the encounter deck, and when can I push my win condition? There's a lot of different facets to go along with tempo. But for today, we've got some guiding questions to bring us through a discussion about tempo. So we're going to switch gears and talk about maintaining momentum and seizing the initiative in the game. So this is all about pushing the win condition while staying somewhat in control and deciding when to step aside from disaster. So here's our list of discussion topics for tempo. Hone had a lot of time to prepare for this episode. I think I sent him the discussion topics 7 minutes ago or something like that. So here we go.
Just trying to, set the pace.
Yeah, I wanted to keep you on your toes, just like the encounter deck does, because I believe a good tempo player has to be able to react to the encounter deck very well. So the first question I have for you is, what is tempo play in Marvel Champions? How would you define tempo within a co-op setting as a general playstyle or archetype?
Yeah, I think we covered this definitely a bit in the kind of overall episode, and I think you basically described it in the intro thing. I don't know if my answer deviates too much, but I think it really is about kind of decision making in the moment and being able to, like you said, keep that momentum going. And so you don't really want to be hunkering down. You want to be able to kind of push your win condition. So I think, for instance, if we were to talk about, there was a discussion, I think, about, versus PvP, about the matchups for these kind of deck types versus specific scenarios, and how scenarios may lend themselves one way or another. And I think, for instance, a scenario that probably is not as good for tempo or rush even is probably Sabretooth, where you really want to kind of get those big hits, because he basically has that mitigation of kind of erasing all of your tempo play, basically every turn, essentially. And so I feel like he's the anti-tempo kind of scenario.
Yeah, that makes sense. The healing he gets can kind of counteract your little pings that you're hitting along the way. I see tempo as a balancing of pressure. So you're trying to build just enough board state to have a board presence without losing grip of the situation, but not necessarily controlling everything that comes out of the encounter deck. So I see it as, I think I said control was kind of reactive. I think control tries to react to everything. Tempo tries to react to just the things it needs to. And rush more tries to react to nothing. So my description of tempo as a play style would be, we avoided using the word mid-range, which is the normal, like, probably name you would give something like this in a competitive TCG, but it's this intermediate level of speed of play and risk tolerance between control the board completely and ignore the board completely. So that might seem like it's every situation, because you should always be like having that risk tolerance decision with yourself. But I think this is like a dedicated deck building and play style towards being in the middle ground.
Yeah, so I think this.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah, I was saying I think this playstyle really thinks about action advantage each turn. Is usually how I kind of think about it, and hopefully we'll be able to dive into that, I think, when we talk about specific cards and decks.
Yeah. I think we already covered this, but how does tempo differ for tempo or rush?
I think the thing you just said, right? Like, rush tries very hard to mostly ignore and go face all the time. Whereas I think tempo, I think like when you're doing stuff like rush, you maybe aren't thinking about action advantage, right? And with tempo, you're trying to find that balance where you want to do things where you can out economy the villain, but you're not necessarily going to, like hunker all the way down and basically make sure that like you can build out your Iron Man armor suit, where you, by the end of it, you should have complete action advantage over the villain, because you can trigger, your gauntlets and all these things ready. You get 2 activations every turn, like all those things where you are just out econing the villain by the time it's all built out, right?
Yeah. I like to see tempo as like the most thinky version of playstyles in Marvel Champions. Not saying the other versions don't think, but when I played Hearthstone, I played a lot of Face Hunter, and I've played quite a bit of Rush in Marvel Champions, where I don't have to think very much, I just ignore things. And Control seems like it would be more of the thinky style, because you have to figure out how to eliminate this threat and eliminate this threat, but at the end of the day, you're eliminating threats and optimizing that. Here you have to really have that decision point in your hand of, well, I have a handful of a toolbox of cards, and which cards are the most important to play. And there's also a toolbox of cards that the villain's throwing at me, and which ones are the most important to eliminate. At work, we accept a lot of work, and we're being told we have to say no more, but we're not allowed to say no. We're allowed to say not right now. So you have to figure out which of the cards you're going to say not right now to, right? Whether it be a minion or a side scheme or a treachery card that does something nasty to you. Am I going to heal? Not right now. That's a later problem. So you have to have this really tactile decision making, which I think is fun. So one thing that's really interesting about tempo to me, and I think that this goes for all playstyles, is there are some aspect cards and hero cards that really like live and breathe that playstyle, right? Under Surveillance might be a great example of a card that lives and breathes a control playstyle, but it can also be useful to the other playstyles. So I thought we could talk about what makes a good tempo card in Marvel Champions, what makes a good tempo aspect card, and maybe what are some examples of different tempo aspect cards. Why don't you define what makes a good tempo card first?
I think a good tempo card in Marvel Champions is about allowing you to either shut something down without having to necessarily fully resolve it, or something that gives you that kind of econ advantage. So I think in a lot of those cases, sometimes when I think about tempo with choice, a lot of times I'm looking at, I think, some of the cheaper cards, so I can maybe do a lot of things in a turn. And so those things kind of, I think, work well. Or you're basically getting a 2-for-1 deal, I think, oftentimes. So maybe a good example of this is Spider-Woman's, I guess if we just talk about identity, Spider-Woman's ability to like play a card and then boost her stat line means that every at least aspect card she plays feels great in her, and especially when there's 0 cost, right? Like if I'm playing a 0 cost card that gives me a stat boost, like that feels pretty good, right? And so those kind of things allow you to kind of get that kind of, econ over the encounter deck, essentially.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I think what I'm looking for in tempo cards is versatility. Not just the versatility that's in every champion's card of, oh, I could use this as a resource, but like I do multiple things and I do them in different ways. So one example of that is cards like First Hit that have two different uses, right? I could use this to take out a minion. I could also use this to punch the villain. I think that more classic examples might be something like Stealth Strike or like Hard Knocks. Hey, I'm going to take care of this thing on the board. It's also going to give me this other advantage. So I want things that are versatile in that like I can use them for multiple purposes. I also like things that push a little bit of face while still maintaining the board. So cards like Relentless Assault that puts a little bit of damage on the villain but also takes care of some cleanup is a great example of a tempo card where you're not controlling everything on the board, but also getting some advantage for doing it. So yeah, things like Relentless Assault, anything with overkill, really, I guess. Dropkicks, another example of that, right? You could deal 4 to the villain. If you've done this all correctly, you can stun the villain and get that card draw. So you can progress the game state a little bit, but also like get this little bit of controlling aspect. I think it can be really hard to tell when something's a good tempo card, because tempo is in the middle of the spectrum between these two extremes. So an example of a card that I think works really well in tempo, but I think at its core is actually a rush card, and this might seem weird, is Pinned Down from Protection. Because Pinned Down, like at its heart, what it lets you do is ignore something. And that's what a rush deck wants to do. I want to be able to ignore that threat and just keep pushing face for very cheap costs. So Pinned Down lets me ignore an ally or a minion for the rest of the game. That sounds great. It also works in tempo because we could lean a little bit more towards the pushing damage side and ignoring threat side of the spectrum. But it's a fascinating card to me because it works in multiple playstyles and it works well for different use cases in those playstyles. So I think cards that let you ignore a little bit of something or like let you put off dealing with something for a turn. One type of card that I think was meant to be kind of like a tempo play, but I don't think has like a full effect or use yet, are cards that let you bypass guard or crisis icons, right? I can ignore this crisis side scheme and still take care of the main scheme. Those are really powerful cards, but I don't know if there's enough of them and if crisis icons are common enough for them to be super useful in tempo decks yet. Although I do still find them useful when I'm playing a tempo deck in the right aspect against the right scenario. My summary in general is versatile cards, high value tools, so I'm looking for things that are very cheap, or if they're expensive, they have like 2 or 3 effects coming off of them to justify that expense, and things like that. Do you want to go through some examples of some aspect cards that we think are good tempo cards?
Beyond the ones that you listed?
I listed a few, but we have like a list from all the aspects, right? In theory.
I was curious, actually, what you think about the minion fetching cards.
That's a really good question.
And if you think they fit in the tempo playstyle, because they check the box in that they are cheap. I think all of them are 0 cost except for infiltration, which is 1, including like Thor's ability to do it, right? 0 cost 1 there. You're getting high value for costs, but it's at the cost of a minion. Obviously very scenario dependent too, because it depends on the minions that are in there, of course. But what are
if
your
you're using a
thoughts on?
Thunderbolts mod, maybe don't. The way I see minion summoning cards, I think they can be a tempo card. Spoiler alert, what we're going to find after we've gone through this axis of risk tolerance is that there's probably a second or third dimension to playstyles and deck building that also influence how you deck build. And one of those things is looking at like a combo deck versus like a really generalist, consistent deck. And I think that the minion summoning cards fetch really well under a combo deck tempo style. Maybe it's because I know the scenario and I know that the minions are wimpy enough that I can summon them, gain the good effect, and that's powerful enough for me. Or maybe I want to summon them and then take advantage of them in some way by using Relentless Assault or whatever. But I think that they can feel a little bit like a trap in a tempo playstyle because you're creating something that then you have to make a decision about whether or not you're going to ignore it. So you really have to bake your whole deck around that so that you don't accidentally start summoning things that make you spend more time controlling those than keeping pace with the game. So I think the advantage that comes off of the summoning has to far outweigh the minions that are coming out, and then they make good tempo cards. So I think the leadership one is a really good example of that. I think Come Get Me Bub is a really good design for that, because a tough card and a heal means you avoid threat from having to recover. You get a tough card to avoid a villain activation, and the minion hopefully is wimpy enough that you don't care about it. So I think they fit in there. I think they're an interesting card that fits in all playstyles, right? Because in a control playstyle, eventually you've set up your machines so that summoning those minions doesn't even phase you, it just gives you more advantage. In an aggro playstyle, or a rush playstyle, you might just be summoning those minions and going face anyway, so you don't care if a minion comes out. If it gives you what you need in that moment, like the ready from the new Spoiling for a Fight spoiler that we've seen for the Winter Soldier pack, then cool, I'll take a minion, he can sit over there while I ready and then punch the villain's face. So I think they fit in every playstyle, and I think they're the trickiest to navigate in tempo of the 3 playstyles. What do you think? You asked the question, so you must have an opinion.
I was just asking for your opinion. No, I mean, I agree. I think it probably more than anything is just very scenario dependent. Like you said, if you're looking for trouble and it's Thunderbolts, I'm pretty sure you don't want to fetch that minion necessarily, Or if you're playing Kree Fanatic, I'm pretty sure whatever benefit you're getting is not worth pulling out Ronin,
I guess just throwing out some other examples of cards that I think are really good tempo style cards. There are things that reward you for doing the opposite thing. So something like Turn the Tide is just a 0-cost card that gives you extra damage after removing threat if it is the last threat being removed from a scheme. So this could be really powerful because it's like increasing the cost of your thwart event or thwart action by 1, but then getting to deal a bunch of damage for that 1 resource. So I think things like that are really good for tempo. I think cards that are super efficient, like Clear the Area, where they replace themselves. Maria Hill, obviously, sort of replaces part of her cost. And things like Press the Advantage, right? If I'm stunning the villain and I get to deal a little bit of damage and draw the card, that could be really good for that action efficiency that you were talking about. And I really think a lot of it is, to me, I guess you already said this, but cards that are really cheap in cost that can have really big impacts. So I've gotten really into Moment of Triumph recently, which is like a really old Marvel Champions card, but basically when you do excess damage to something, you heal 1 for each point of excess damage dealt after an attack or as an interrupt to an attack. I can't remember the trigger. But that's a really powerful ability. And if you can overkill something, if you can kill something with overkill and get a little damage on face, that's really good. But you can also do this just to heal and avoid flipping down. And that can also be super, super strong as a way to maintain your board state and keep the pressure going towards the villain. I think other cards that could be really versatile are readies. I find that readies are really good in tempo playstyle. You can definitely rack and stack 1 attribute and do this in a rush playstyle as well. But if you have a 2/2/2 stat line, and you can ready 3 times, that means you can defend, you can attack, and you can thwart all with the same character. So any cheap readies that you can get into your deck are really, really strong for tempo. Because the other thing, and the next topic for tempo, is figuring out the puzzle of your hand. Is after the villain phase and all the bad stuff happens, you kind of have to react to what happened in that turn. And you may have had a hand that was like, cool, I can do 16 points of damage next turn. But now a threat came out that's so important that I need to focus on that threat instead of doing my 16 points of damage. So I think that any cards that are dual use in those ways that help you be able to pivot on your turn, and generally that's cheap cards or readies, can be a really good way to do that. So I know we were talking a little bit before the show, but did you want to give us your thoughts on solving the puzzle that is your hand, and when you might have 2 cards in your hand, how do you decide how to deal with a threat or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, like you were saying, I think having cheap cards give you a lot of options there. Oftentimes, too, with tempo, I think if you have things that can get you more information, so doing kind of those things early so you can evaluate what the best outcome is. So for instance, if you have that mansion or something kind of that can get you that card information, having someone play that Maria Hill, clearing the area to get that card, if that was a thing you can do, if you're going to do that anyways, kind of doing that ahead of time helps. And then kind of the puzzle, I guess, is it probably depends on how important or how pressing that threat is kind of when you're making those decisions and how far away you probably are from your win condition. I know with control, that's a thing that eventually happens, that you gotta push the win condition at some point. But I think with tempo, it's a decision kind of every turn. And if you're playing solo, I think it's much easier to just, because the global health point is much smaller. So I think you can kind of press that win condition, and you also don't have to rely on the other players to also be playing tempo with you, because you represent the entire play state there. Like, some of the things that I think, if you're thinking about tempo, oftentimes for me is like side schemes that do acceleration are things that I'm much more willing to leave on the board, right? Like, if it's going to cost me 4 threat to clear a thing that does 1 acceleration, like, how much does that matter? Like, I basically can thwart 4 times of one single thing, for over 4 turns. And like, can I do something of more impact, right? Like, unless I'm getting some extra value out of clearing that side scheme, it might be worth just leaving that on the table.
A not right now problem.
Yeah, not right now problem.
Those are classic.
Yeah.
I think the same thing happens with minions too. Sometimes a minion comes out, and some of the newer minions, like the Thunderbolt mods, they can just be nasty. But some of the minions in these scenarios, they're just like generic 1/1 bodies that have some theme painted on them and might have like an enters play effect. Once you've survived the enters play effect, like the little 1 drip damage, a lot of times you can ignore. So I think that for me, that's one thing, is every time a minion comes out, deciding if now is the time to kill the minion, looking at how thick the encounter deck is and saying, that's about to get reshuffled. Should I kill this minion now or wait a turn so I get to ignore his when played effect for an extra round? And sometimes the answer is obvious, right? There's like a 1/1 minion that has 2 health, and I have a swinging lead kick in hand, so I'm not going to waste 8 damage on this 2 health minion. But sometimes it's less obvious, and there's like a reasonably sized beefy minion that has 2 attack and 2 thwart, and I have to make a real decision out of it. And I think those are the situations that tempo can handle really well, whereas the other playstyles might struggle a little bit.
I think there's a really good example of this, which is the Mysterio scenario, where you get those 1/1. I just played this last week with the Con Heroes Challenge, and what was interesting was I feel like it's really tempting to kill those minions, and it's actually surprisingly hard in a lot of heroes, if you don't deck build specifically for it, to have the exact 1 damage it takes without taking that card. And it's actually a massive delayed tempo hit in the future if you choose to like take that card from Mysterio.
Speaking of like time management as tempo, a lot of times in tempo we're treating turns as like time investments and action investments. So we want to know, how do we get the most villain pressure without falling behind on threats and minions and nasty attachments? So when playing control, I'm typically trying to think 1 or 2 rounds ahead. I have to clear this guy now because in 2 rounds this will add up to too much. How many turns do you try to think ahead with tempo? Are you thinking like about what's just on the board right now, or also about what's on the board and the next villain activation, or like how far ahead are you thinking? Or is this a foreign concept? That could also be the answer.
I think when I analyze the board, I think about, well, so one, it depends on how well I know the encounter deck, because not all threats are equal. And if you know both the mod and the villains that are in there, depending on what that threat is, you can make calculations on how much leaving this thing on the board, even if it's not a problem now, will be a problem later. And so that, I think that goes into the calculation, right, of if I can ignore this or not. Because if there's a thing in here, that gives, like there's side schemes. I think side schemes do this, or environments. Well, you can't really deal with environments most of the time, but like side schemes that will give, minions quick strike, or give them tough, or give them whatever, right? And so you kind of make calculations based off of how many minions are left in the counter deck, for instance. Like, do I need to deal with this now? And if most of the minions are actually in the discard pile because maybe I'm playing a minion fetching deck, maybe I can ignore it. Or if I'm playing a minion fetching deck, maybe I don't want to fetch a minion that's going to quick strike me in the face, And how much does that like hurt my tempo for my ability to kind of gain economy there? So I think those are the calculations that I think about. Or like, is this thing going to, like having minions on the board, but then I know the encounter deck has tons of stuff like in Zola, right? Where you might get stuff where he's not that bad, but like if I leave this on the board and he gets a thing that gives him like +1/+1 and 5 hit points, I'm going to regret that decision, right? I think those are things that you have to take into account about the potential threat of leaving a thing on the board, even if it's not as bad in the current turn.
Yeah.
So it's usually not like X turns, it's like some future state, because I have no idea what's necessarily going to happen the next turn.
Yeah, that's fair. I like to think of like some key cards that I know are in there, like Gang Up, right? I can't leave this minion out because I know Gang Up's still in there, and if it's the Mess of Things mod, maybe 2 Gang Ups are in there. Or I can't leave this minion out because a teamwork ability exists that's going to make this minion trigger against me, and I don't want that. So I tend to think about those like futuristic states, but I try not to dwindle on every futuristic state that could exist. I do that a lot more when I spiral out of control and control land. You mentioned Zola there, so I think this would be a good time to talk about some heroes that are really good in a tempo playstyle and some villains that are good and also villains that might challenge players that like the tempo playstyle. So what do you think are like the top, not the top, like we're not asking for the top X, but what are some of the top heroes for a tempo playstyle?
Were you mentioning things for ready?
Totally. He can do this all day.
I think, Gamora is probably the other one for me that I was thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to just get that extra little, like you can play a Justice deck, right, with her or any of these sword events, and still you don't even have to apply that ping damage on minions. You can just hit the villain with it, and so you can just be thwarting and still be kind of pushing win conditions slowly, except maybe against Sabretooth. Who else am I thinking about?
I was thinking of Black Panther, OG Black Panther, right? With your Wakanda Forever, you can set up a really tempo playstyle cheap event, right? If you just have the Panther Claws and the Tactical Genius out there, you can punch for 2 and remove 2 threats, or you can remove 1 threat and punch for 4 for 2 effective resources, which is pretty good. And as you get more pieces out there, you can build an even more unstoppable engine. Barring building completely all 4 Black Panther upgrades, you can set up the right set of upgrades for the situation that's unfolding from the deck. So I thought that was a good example. I think Venom's always good because you have that option to use your life as a resource, which is really powerful for tempo. And I think Rocket can be really powerful for tempo too, because you can prioritize defeating minions to gain extra advantage and maybe ignoring some of the other things that come out of the encounter deck. Based on the Winter Soldier previews, it seems like he has a built-in tempo into his hero ID, right? When I defeat a minion, I will get to remove threat. That should provide a really like cool tempo style for him. But yeah, the 2 I was thinking of were Rocket, Venom, and Black Panther.
I think Black Panther's really interesting because I don't know if I would normally think of him in tempo just because of his suit. You do get the choice of picking which upgrade you start with as the setup, and then obviously Vibranium I think helps, but man, one suit upgrade Wakanda Forever feels bad even if it's not mathematically bad.
Yeah, I don't think I would usually play it with just 1 upgrade out, but I'm thinking of once you get 2 upgrades out, you're usually set up to be very versatile, where you now have an event that does damage and threat removal, or damage and healing, or AoE damage and focus damage, or whatever you might need, right? So I think it was Dr. 00 a long time ago, because at the start of the game, we were all very big on Black Panther getting all of those upgrades out, and then being like, don't even play your Wakanda Forevers until you get 4 upgrades. And I don't think for a tempo play of Black Panther that's the right choice. I think you pick just the upgrades you need, and then you use that Vibranium to get extra card advantage out of your hand, right? Where you're just like, cool, well, the villain pooped out these 2 things. I can poop out 4 because I have Golden City and I have Vibranium, and I don't need my other suit upgrades at this point. I can just keep taking 4 damage, 1 threat removal Wakanda Forevers, and play all these other powerful tempo plays. So Dr. 00 way back then said something like, you don't necessarily, I'm making up a quote, paraphrasing from way back in the day, it isn't actually more resource efficient to like wait until you get all of your Black Panther suit upgrades down, because it might make more sense to start pushing damage or controlling the board first. And yes, it's definitely more like efficient for that 2 effective resource or 1 cost Wakanda Forever. It's more powerful once all 4 upgrades are out. but the opportunity cost of playing it earlier when you only have 2 upgrades out, but they're the right 2 upgrades, is really advantageous and like pushes you to this like tempo playstyle.
I think what's interesting
that
is that Marvel Champions, even without knowing any of that stuff, like when I played Black Panther, you don't always have the choice. Maybe you don't have better things to play. You're going to play that Wakanda forever, right? And I think one of the things that interests me about Marvel Champions is that whether you're trying to play tempo or not, like the hand puzzle is the hand puzzle every turn, right? And you got to do most with kind of the hand you have.
How often will you hold a card from hand to hand when playing tempo?
While playing tempo?
Yeah.
It probably depends on...
Such
it depends on, I think, my role in the group. Like, if I'm playing multiplayer, it probably depends on... Like, for instance, you can consider a perfect defense deck a tempo deck. Or a tempo-enabling deck.
I don't think I do. I mean, it depends on what type of perfect defense you're talking about. If you're boosting your defense stats with events, or if you're building up this unstoppable machine, those are 2 different ways to play sort of the same role, if that makes sense.
I think I will hold cards depending on how critical they are, or knowing that, like, maybe I need an attack event to do
I've
things.
Noticed when you and I play, you tend to hold cards a lot more than I'm willing to. But I think part of that for me is that I am just so against green cards existing that holding cards feels bad for me. And when I play tempo, I feel the same way. Very rarely do I hold on to a card. I try to get the most efficiency out of my hand that I can, because in my mindset, every time I'm not playing a card, I'm giving up some of that action and resource efficiency that I need as the tempo player to outpace the villain. Whereas on those...
Usually one card for those kind of things for me is like, I did enough other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was able to spend everything but one card. So, like, I would basically have to do a different action to be able to efficiently spend that net one card. The thing for holding cards for me, where I think it does fit in tempo, is consistency. So, for sure for green, like, you want those defense events, but even I think for aggression or other things... They're like, sure, you can stack the deck for things, but sometimes you just don't draw that attack event, right? And so maybe you do want to hold on that big 3-cost attack event or any attack event because you're running Hone Technique, you're running, whatever. Like, does me burning this thing kind of help set up, or is it better to help set up my next turn knowing I have this card going in? So I think it kind of depends kind of in that situation for me.
And I've seen interesting tempo play with something like Dropkick, right, in a solo tempo game where I'm like, well, I have 2 Dropkicks in my hand and I can play one. Maybe I hold the other one because I know next turn that I can eliminate the villain phase again by playing Dropkick again. Or I have a backflip in hand with Spider-Man, so I'm willing to hold on to that card. I found in rush playstyles, I tend to play a lot more combo rush playstyles where I'm trying to get like a skilled strike and something else and a moment of triumph or something. There, I'm a lot more willing to be like, I'm going to hold on to this mean swing because I'm getting 1 card for 3 damage next turn and I've already exhausted all my weapons this turn. And I know that like 1 resource for 3 damage is pretty good. So if I'm giving this up, I'm unlikely to draw something better. But in tempo, I'm always thinking about like, can I play my hand differently to squeeze out all the resources I can? And it's something I need to challenge myself to do.
I don't think I've ever seen you hold a card, actually, in all our times playing together.
I would make a joke from Star Wars LCG. There was a card called Holding All the Cards, but I won't because that card got banned, and I was maybe the reason for that. But anyway, I do hold cards occasionally, but it's usually to chain status effects or to like set up a combo in a combo deck, right? I will hold like Maria Hill or Black Cat in my hand in the Defend with Allies Spider-Man deck if I don't have a regroup down, because I know holding these one more turn will net me 4 resources next turn versus dumping them on the board this turn and letting them dissipate. Maybe that's more about not defending with them than holding them in hand, but those are the kind of things that I will usually hold back. But I agree. Spend all your money. Spend it wisely. The other thing that I think is really interesting in tempo, and then we got to get to the villains because I deviated from my original question to you, is defending in tempo. This is something I struggle with in all phases of Marvel Champions. Is
because you don't like green?
I would rather die than defend, right? That's the type of player I am. I am a Nate French schooled player. I would rather my character be defeated and leave the game than have to be forced to defend. But sometimes it's important. So how do you make the decision of when to and it's obviously I know what you're going to tell me. You're going to say it depends on the scenario and the board state. And maybe that should be like the theme of tempo in general is it depends. But how do you decide when to take the tempo hit and defend in a tempo deck, knowing that that's going to you don't know what's going to come in the rest of the villain phase. So it might be, I needed my basic activation, but I was stupid and I defended. That's the thought trap I always get stuck in. But you're much better, even when not playing protection, of figuring out when the right time to defend is. At least this is my observations from Con of Heroes. So how do you figure out when to defend in a tempo deck?
I think it depends on the situation. I think so. One, it probably depends on the deck you're trying to play.
Mm-hmm.
Is defending part of, even if you're not playing a perfect defense, or a protection kind of thing, is defending part of the kit. So an example of this for me is if I'm playing heroes that have a 3 defense naturally, maybe I will build around the fact that my hero just doesn't need to be ready, and if I have to pay the piper my rent is due, I'm screwed for that one turn. But the probability of that is relatively low. It's 1 card in an entire encounter deck, right? And I'll take that hit that one time, and maybe get the free flip down and get a resource that way, and then flip back up, right? And so, I think it really depends on the hero you're playing. Oftentimes, because most heroes, for instance, have better healing, recovery, than defense.
Mm-hmm.
But it does cost you to go down, right? So I think you have to look at the board state of how much does flipping down impact the board state for the cost of health? Because that's really the trade-off, right? Is that for a lot of heroes, unless you're building in healing into your kit somehow in hero form, what it's going to cost you to recover that health could be a larger tempo hit down the line. And so that's kind of the calculation that goes in my head is does me staying up in hero form give me more action economy than losing a bunch of health and forcing me to have to flip down when I don't want to?
I love it. Scenarios that are difficult for tempo to deal with or are advantageous for tempo to deal with. You pick. Go.
I think scenarios that, obviously Sabretooth, like we mentioned, I think anything that kind of deletes or kind of, is constantly, I feel negating any of the tempo progress you're making can be challenging. I'm trying to think of another scenario that is not like Sabretooth that does this.
Difficult scenario. Well, tempo's just the best. So, it's hard to think of things that don't work well. I'm just kidding. I guess something that would be difficult to deal with for tempo, or can be difficult for a tempo deck that wants to poke the villain constantly, right, is risky business, right? If you're going to play tempo playstyle, you're probably going to flip him more than you want to. Still shouldn't be a difficult scenario because you should make the right decision to not flip him if you're going for the win. But if you're going for the thematic punching of Green Goblin, a risky business flipping more often can be kind of painful. I found in solo that Rhino can be a really difficult tempo playstyle. Even though Rhino is very basic, it's just that main scheme of 7 threat only can be really, really low and punishing.
Does that make it bad for tempo? I feel like that just makes it harder for control.
I think it makes it harder for control, but I think it also, with tempo...
Because I don't think, Rush is necessarily better for Rhino.
No, I don't think...
you can't just ignore that main scheme, necessarily.
I think you can, if you can do enough damage quickly enough. I think Rhino is easier in a control play style because you bring enough things to mitigate that main scheme. You have to build specifically for it, right? You have to bring your under surveillance or whatever's. But I think that in tempo, the idea of leaving some threats on the board becomes very dangerous when the threat threshold is very low. It's a lot easier when the threat threshold is 12 or 15 per player or something like that, because you can afford to have made the wrong decision once and it doesn't just snowball immediately to a loss. Whereas control, right, you're keeping the board state super clean so that I've played control games where I've even flipped down against Rhino because I had him confused and I had under surveillance out and I said, this is super safe. I've never felt that way playing tempo when I'm poking him a little bit and leaving a minion out or leaving an acceleration side scheme out. So, I don't know. I could be wrong. People
what do you think
will
about
tell me I'm wrong.
4 Horsemen?
Four Horsemen's a good example, I think.
In some ways, I actually think it's worse for control if you don't do anything about the one that removes your upgrades.
Yeah.
So maybe tempo is actually better there because you're making a calculated decision.
Well, let's talk about where tempo's good. Maybe that'll tell us also where it's not so good. I think in general, a lot of Marvel Champions designed is, we talked about this last episode with Char, is designed for control playstyle, right? We're given that first turn. There's not a lot of advantage in pushing against the villain in that first turn. There's a lot more advantage and momentum put towards building and controlling. So scenarios that don't throw things out at you right away are very strong for control. So scenarios that are throwing things out at you are probably pretty good for tempo to deal with, because you can deal with that threat and then still start making progress right away. So I think some scenarios... Oh, you go.
I was going to say, I think you get that naturally in design because you get to control when the stage flips, and usually there is something that happens, right? When revealed on stage 2 or 3 of the villain, essentially. Mm-hmm. Green Goblin probably being the most iconic of let me spew out a bunch of encounter cards at you. So you kind of got to flip him when you're ready to deal with it. And I think, like you said in that opening kind of video for this series, I think that really pushed people towards control, right? Like, I'm not going to flip him prematurely because I don't want to deal with 3 encounter cards or 4 encounter cards unless I'm ready to do it. Because if I don't, that might actually cost me the game, right?
Yeah, where I see tempo having the most advantage is in, I think for control, I said when the encounter deck is pretty fair, control has a lot of advantage, and in most of the games, the encounter deck is pretty fair. When the encounter deck is like slightly unfair, it's putting out a little more pressure than you can like reliably build around. I feel like that's when tempo is in its sweet spot. And then eventually when the encounter decks are just insane, they're dumping so many things on you, like there's no way you're going to make the right decisions because things are so random. That's when rush like comes in, right? Like we can try to play tempo against Nebula. I tried it before this episode just to like remind myself of tempo playstyles. It did not go well. And then I tried a rush deck against Nebula and we killed her on the first try. And it's because we weren't ignoring all threats, but we were ignoring most threats, right? We were closer to that rush end of the spectrum. So I think when the encounter deck is being slightly unfair, is how I would phrase it, that's where tempo can really shine. So when there's like random flipping happening, like the apocalypse that changes forms and things like that, it could really give you, like, your hand is this reactionary puzzle to the things that are coming out, and you've built your deck and your whole play style around being able to react well. So when you have to, like, take these sudden twists and turns, that's when tempo can be really good. So I think for most of the Galaxy's Most Wanted box, or certainly the first 3 scenarios, I think tempo is really good against Drang. I think it's really good against Collector 1 and Collector 2, but especially Collector 1.
Collection?
That's the one with the collection, right? So
yep.
Being able to choose to ignore the right minion or not use an ally for chumping and things like that, and being very tactile with your decisions. When you play with that mindset, that scenario, it doesn't become a breeze, but it becomes a lot easier than it does with the chump blocking control mindset. So that's pretty fascinating. And I feel like a lot of the shield box is really good for tempo, because there's a lot of, I always describe it as like the way the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. box feels is every scenario you're given too many buttons to push, and you have to pick like what order to push the buttons in so that next round it's not so out of control. And that's very tempo focused, right? Like I need to be able to do damage here and threat removal here and spend a resource here to progress our win condition. And I want to do that this turn so that next turn it's not worse. And I feel like control playstyles and rush playstyles can really struggle with that, like having to hit multiple buttons and not just drop Avengers Mansions or swing face for uppercuts.
What do you think about Mojo, the pack? Not necessarily just that scenario. Because you have... And what's interesting about it, too, is, like, I think the Coliseum Gladiator, or Magog, that scenario is... My answer for that is very different between Standard and Expert.
Yeah.
Just because it turns out changing some of those values makes a big difference. And I think that goes into your fair versus unfair kind of arguing on that. And I think, time limits, which is what you get from Mojo. And then Spiral, I think you just get massive threat with the kind of higher acceleration of the main scheme. And so I think they have very kind of different encounter deck pressures that are applied to you as the player.
Yeah. I think that those are super. I think tempo is very favorable into, especially Spiral and Mojo. Magog, I would agree, depends depends on standard or expert. I think standard Magog tempo does pretty well against. I think expert Magog can just go off the rails because it can.
Well, I think you're pressured in tempo to play probably more rush against that, but obviously if you're playing like perfect defense or something, it gives you a lot more options to kind of be more control because you can buy more time.
Yeah, I agree. Sweet.
There's one interesting thing from Scenario's design from a certain perspective. Just think about the conversation from Discord of, like usually comparing like player decks versus scenarios in some ways. Do you think there are certain encounter decks that have a more tempo play style?
Like the encounter deck itself is playing tempo?
Yes.
Where it's trying to out-tempo the heroes?
Yes. I think like Hood's my classic example there, but I also think having just played the Mysterio Challenge thing, anything like Collector is probably another one of those, right? Where anything that is like discarding things actually decreases your action advantage. Like if I'm removing upgrades off of a player, I as the encounter or villain am getting tempo over you because now you can do less things.
I think a lot of the scenarios
and now you have to, in the Collector, you're forced to deal with the fact that I put something in the collection from you.
Yeah. I think anything in a scenario with a timer or with an alternative loss condition, because usually those timers are associated with those loss conditions, can really lend itself to tempo really well. The basic example is Ultron. Once you get to that stage 3, like you have to play tempo with Ultron to deal with his drones, but then you really have to play tempo at the end. You can't still be building when you're on a clock. But I think like tower defense, having that alt loss condition of your tower is going to eventually explode. It inevitably will happen eventually if you draw the right treachery cards. That can be a very big like tempo playstyle from the villain pushing onto you, right? Not only are they trying to threat out, and not only are they trying to attack you and murder you, but they're also attacking this other thing that could cause problems for you. And I think that is a really interesting way for the villain to play tempo. I wouldn't say tower defense was the most successful tempo design, but I think it was a tempo design.
What do you think about Project Wide Awake?
Yeah, that makes sense. Spitting out minions.
Well, not only spinning out minions, but there is an alternate loss condition where, like, anytime you chump
with the allies getting tucked,
with the allies and then you can definitely lose. I definitely have played that and have lost a lot in the challenge that they did last year. It was like one of the last challenges where, I mean, part of that was just Bastion just sitting there going to face on you, but I definitely have lost a lot on that alternate loss condition because sometimes it's just like a lot of attacks.
Yeah, I think anything where there's that secondary mini game, the villain deck is really trying to play tempo with you.
Yeah, Unis.
So another example would be Eunice, right? With the gene pool side scheme. I don't think the way I play against Eunice, I try to have no threat on there ever, so it basically doesn't affect me. But I think the idea behind it was for like you to be making this calculated risk of when do I let the gene pool pop or build up. So I think that's an attempt at a tempo playstyle as well. From the villain. The bad guys. That was a good question. Curveball. That wasn't on the script. You can't do things like that. I'm just kidding. They're great. The next topic was for you to show us a tempo playstyle deck. And since you've now had 55 minutes plus 7 minutes of notice, I'm sure you have the perfect one to show us.
I don't know about perfect.
The perfect defense one to show us, right?
Perfect defense as a green player? I did build a green deck, though.
Gross. Yuck. People can tune out now if you're here for not green cards. I understand.
Wow. Where's Americano?
Where is Americano? Who is Americano? What is Americano?
What is an Americano? Isn't he did he even play green cards at Kana Heroes?
I made him play a green deck at least once.
So I built this deck with 7 minutes of notice.
It's beautiful. I love everything about it.
It's beautiful. It has... I figured if we're based on the title of the episode, you're talking about setting the pace, and so that's a Lilia card titled in Gamora's signature set, so I figured she's the way to go. And then she also has 4 momentum, so you got to keep that momentum going. So I figure you can't go wrong if two of her signature events basically are defined in the description of what tempo is.
If we're doing puns, I noticed that there's no momentum shift, for which I'm disappointed. So that's 3 points off for Gryffindor or whatever. Anyway,
wait,
you go.
Isn't Slytherin the greenhouse? Slytherin's the greenhouse.
I don't know Harry Potter.
So in this deck, I was going for basic options on the table. So we were talking about Gamora as being a potentially good tempo hero. I think some of the stuff for me for tempo heroes are they ideally don't require a ton of setup. So, I mean, there are setup stuff for Gamora, but I think you really have, conditioning room, which, depending on how much you're flipping down or not, maybe a thing you don't even need to play. But it's still nice to get out there. You have Gamora's sword. Super nice, but is pretty expensive. Kind of depends on, I think, when you're cycling through, if you can afford to pay for it or not. But obviously, you get a ton of value out of taking that tempo hit for that one turn. But then I feel like the core of her kit revolves around playing events, obviously, for attack and thwarts. And so these are one-class upgrades, and you take a tempo hit that turn, but I think they pay for themselves very quickly. Any of these kind of resource generate cards do, especially when they only cost one. And so in this kit, I have basically, I wanted some options to do with minions as they come out, and I wanted to play around a little bit with, I think, Infiltration, which is, I think, probably the best minion fetching card in the game, in the sense that when you don't even have a minion, you still get to remove the threat. So all the other ones kind of, you lose the effect if you don't grab a minion. So you can play this in Thunderbolts, and it's probably fantastic because you're paying one, your event, which you can trigger with a single Keen Instincts or whatever, remove potentially 5 threat. It does get you acceleration tokens more, so that is a trade-off that you're going to have to kind of make the call for, but I think most of the times it's worth it. And if you get a bunch of minions, you only have to put one in, right? So you do get that fun choice of like, which one of these things am I dealing with? Another kind of tempo card for me is Face the Past. So we didn't talk about this, but I think this is very hero dependent. Some heroes have really terrible nemesis, so this is not an auto include. It's the classic, depends on what you're building and the situation, right? Like, I may not choose to play Face the Past if I have a bunch of other minions I'm dealing with, right? Or I may not play it if I don't have it pinned down in my hand. So Nebula, if you don't actually care about your Nebula, and Nebula is a fantastic ally, she is actually only a 1/2 with an enter play effect that removes your ally. She has Retaliate too, but like, if you have a Reliance Assault in your hand, you can get rid of her. Or if you have pinned down, you can just leave her in front of you forever. And so she has a Retail too, but you just never have to deal with it. And so, Face the Past might be a card I'm willing to play if I have kind of the solutions I have in my hand to deal with it, or have a high chance of hoping to draw into those, right? Depending on what I have in my discard, etc. I think one of the things that Gamora has in her kit, like I was saying, is her ability to have finesse and precision. So it, I think, makes cards that I generally don't consider more interesting, like True Grit. And so generally this isn't a card I would play, but this is a thing that triggers on Keen Instincts. Like we were talking about the defense discussion, I may be more willing to defend if I know from that defense I'm taking less damage, but I can remove threat, so what I potentially would have done on the hero side when I was ready. And it also allows me to ping her precision off of that 1-cost event, so I can do that 1 damage. I mean, it's not like the best card, but I think you are getting value out of it, and it's a thing that allows you to do this in the villain phase. And so it doesn't even conflict with the rest of kind of your hand of like what you would want to do on the hero phase. So you're kind of getting that extra 1 damage. And so I think Gamora's probably one of the better heroes that can take advantage of True Grit to kind of get multi-value out of that. The defense, reasonable thwart, like I probably would pay 1 for 2. generally for Thwart there. And getting that extra ping damage I think is icing on the cake there. This coming out of the Jubilee pack, I think there used to be the other 3-cost card. I forget what it was called.
Hit and Run.
That came in Gamora. Yeah, Hit and Run. But I think with Keen Instincts, Multi-Talented is just better than that because you have the options, right? So to me, this is like one of the, like, though it's expensive, one of the kind of epitome of a good tempo card for me, because you can, with Keen Instincts, you can, if you pay for that third thing, you can trigger all three. But, like maybe you can't because you use Keen Instincts on True Grit or something else, right? Like, even if you can get 2 of the 3, you can choose which ones that are more valuable. And then having the ability to heal your identity is another way to like not have to flip down, right? And so I think Multi-Talent's a fantastic kind of thing there. And then the nice thing is it triggers both of Gamora's kind of finesse and protection, like right out of playing a single event there. And then in her kit, she also just has a bunch of like 0-cost kind of things that are, where is it? Yeah, acrobatic move and set the pace, which trigger her thing, cost 0, are very efficient.
Yeah, I love it. I'm noticing like cost curve looking at the right half of your screen. 21 of your cards cost 0 or 1, so that's going to give you the option to do multiple things on many turns. I think you have some really good, interesting decision making, right? You can pin down a minion, but you also might be summoning minions with Bub and then pinning them down, so that might be a little bit of a combo kind of play for a tempo player, but it also lets you pick what's the more important thing right now, right? In my hand, maybe there's a minion on the board, and it's more important for me to pin that down than summon another one. And things that let you sort of do some control so that you get to do some damage as well. So I think Come Get Me Bub's a good example of that. Infiltration's a great example of that. I really like Multi-Talented here. One card that I thought was silly, and then as I thought about it more, I was like, no, it's actually genius, is Drax. At first I was like, this isn't a tempo card. It doesn't even let you make a decision. It's just punch face, right? That's all it does. But at the same time, it's really efficient punch face. So if you play Drax and don't plan to block with him, you've now, for 3 resources, done 12 points of damage to the villain, and you could do that trickled over multiple turns so that you can do a little bit of a control roll while you're playing on that half of the spectrum with the cards in your hand, but still push damage at the villain. And I think that's one thing I do with allies a lot in tempo play, is look for allies that like become this like 4 or 5 turn investment, because then they're building that action economy over time. And Drax is a really good example of one that maybe doesn't have as much flexibility as you'd expect a tempo card to have, but I think because of the efficiency becomes a really good tempo card.
Yeah, actually the allies were, I think the Guardian allies are fantastic generally, plus they're in basic.
Mm-hmm.
It really pained me to remove the Power in All of Us, actually, to make room for Come Get Me Bub, but
I'm seeing that now.
Kenny Hawk kind of convinced me to do that.
I did. It's my fault.
But yeah, I mean, I actually think what's interesting is having multiple choices to deal with the stuff on the board. So the reason Rocket's in here, you get the 2 Thwart if you really need it, but you do have basically a 4 attack minion with Overkill in here. So if you are leaning into the Come Get Me Bub or Infiltrations, or just minions in general because you're playing the game and they will give them to you, especially multiplayer, you have that. You have Relentless Assault, you pin down. So you have like 3 different options to kind of deal with minions coming out. You also have Groot here, so that's actually like a 4th option as well. Like, let's say I play Nebula and that lets him play Groot, or I face the pass and I play Groot, he can just block her the entire game. And so you just take her off the board, right? And so that face the pass, maybe it was kind of a net 0, but it allows you to kind of deal with the stuff on your terms there. Or like, forget Nebula, like any other minion. Or maybe you do have a high attack minion that you pin down. Groot can still just eat that attack and kind of deal with it, right? So I really was looking for things that could deal with the fact that I am getting good economy benefits from pulling minions. Like I wanted multiple ways to deal with that.
I love it. This looks awesome. So if you want to check it out, You can take a screenshot, build it, let us know how it goes in the comments. But now for the thing people really care about, we have to build...
Well, we'll put a link in the show notes somewhere, right?
We'll do that too. If you publish it. I always forget to do that, so you'll have to yell at me when I do.
You can always just share the link without publishing it, by the way.
That's true, unless they just change it on us later.
They just can't, like,
that
comment
would be
on
dirty.
it. It's just like a no-comment deck.
Full of leadership cards or something. So the thing we really need to do, right? The thing we really need to do is build a Hawkeye tempo deck. So I need you to guide me as the tempo expert today. What am I doing? I'm building a tempo deck. I have no cards in it other than my hero kit. What's the first decision you would usually make when building a deck? Probably picking an aspect. So how do you pick an aspect when trying to build with a hero to make it a tempo playstyle deck?
I don't even know if you need to pick the aspect first. I think we should talk about what we want the deck to do.
Okay.
I actually didn't pick the... Well, I mean, I guess Gamora has... The other thing that Gamora has, she has flexibility of picking stuff out of aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was building this, I didn't pick the... I knew I wanted to run True Grit and, other things, and it wasn't really until the 11th hour that I picked production. But I guess for Hawkeye, what do you want your Hawkeye tempo deck to be able to do?
Well, I think it's a good way to figure out how to build a tempo deck is you need a very versatile generalist deck. Typically, that's my opinion. So if your hero is good at something or has access to something, you want to get access to the things you don't have access to. So with Hawkeye, we have access to a lot of status conditions. We have access to pretty good attack capability, but we don't have access to very good thwarting, and we don't have very good access to defending or healing. So I think we did the same thing with control, and I think I tend to build tempo the same way. If there's a glaring weakness in control, you sort of build towards it. And in tempo, it's maybe less of a strong rule, but I tend to build towards the weakness from my hero kit. So here I would think we probably need to shore up our threat removal capability, or our able to maintain and survive on the board capability. We get a little bit of that with status conditions, so maybe it's more important to think about the thwarty stuff.
Are you okay just dealing with status conditions for doing that, or do you want
for survivability? I mean, you're the green player. I think we should build a not a defendy deck, but I think we should build a green deck that tries to shore up that weakness of how do I survive, and maybe survive and put some threat pressure on there. We just did it with Gamora, so we can do the same thing with Hawkeye. But maybe not use True Grit, because that won't work out very well.
I think one of the benefits you get out of any of the 2/2/2 heroes is you get versatility built in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think Hawkeye doesn't have that. I think if you're going to lean into protection, there aren't that many threat removal things you have for you. I think how protection gets around threat pressure, which is not foolproof. It is very scenario dependent. My favorite phrase, apparently, in this episode. But I think how protection gets it through it is that they try to help you not flip down, right? Or I guess in the case of Ready for Fight, get a free flip down in some ways. So I think if you're going to look for green stuff, I feel like one of the things to think about is, are you going to go into minion fetching to shore up healing in hero phase so you don't have to flip down? That's a potential option. Because Hawkeye does have stuff like Explosive Arrow, right? That helps you deal with that. But I don't know if you want to kind of... I think the problem with doing green is maybe it'll look somewhat similar to the Gamora deck, but...
I mean, we did the same thing with Control, so it's okay. That's a tradition now.
That's the tradition.
I think Char built a Shield She-Hulk deck, and then we built a Shield Hawkeye deck. And I don't think it will look exactly the same. I have some ideas on it as well. So I do think Come Get Me Bub can be a good shout here, because it's a choice, right? I don't have to play the Come Get Me Bub, so we're going to put it in there. A lot of times I'll put things in as a 2 if I'm undecided on it, and then I'll bump it up later. But yeah, if we have an Explosive Arrow in our hand, then Come Get Me Bub works out great. If we don't,
or
we
you can
still might
quiver
play
into it. That's the other benefit you get.
What was that?
You can quiver into it and hold it
if we're
in your
able to quiver
quiver
into it.
until you get a come get me buff, so you can set up the combo easier.
Exactly. I think that I like your comment about protection being about avoiding flipping down as our strategy of threat prevention, because that works really well for Hawkeye because we have no reason to flip down. Like every once in a while to get our bow if something very awkward happens. But we're okay staying in hero form and just shooting face all the time. So we can do that by using this package of don't let me flip down. I'll get my one sonic arrow off and that'll cancel in advance. If he advances, then I'll do another sonic arrow later and add a confusion so that I can just ignore threat other than the auto threat coming out onto the scheme.
Yeah. Do you care about side schemes here?
I don't know if we care about hazard symbols, right? Hazard symbols are bad. That's a tempo hit that we cannot afford to leave out there. But I don't
cable
know if
arrow
we
gets
care
around
about
that a little bit.
crisis side schemes as much, right? Our cable arrow does technically avoid those crisis side schemes. So we can do a little bit of tomfoolery there.
Because an option on the table, well, so we'll have to, at some point we'll talk about thwarting, I guess, to some degree.
Yep.
So another option is how much do you want to deal with? So we have Come Get Me Gub, we're going to fetch minions. Is Explosive Arrow enough? Do you want to lean into other things to help you there?
What are you thinking? Give me examples.
Like other options, so there's the pin down route. There's also you have access to things like Victor Mancha as an ally, he's a 2-cost ally, fairly efficient for an ally, and can help you kind of deal with minions for some number of turns.
I like that a lot. I think he's also
you kind of ignore that, right? Minion potentially until you get into that explosive arrow. It just buys you time.
Yeah, it buys you time, and if you don't need to buy that time, you can do something like potentially Earth's Mightiest Heroes off of him.
Yeah.
So he gives you lots of different options of what to do. We're going to put that in as a 2 because it's undecided on, but we'll put it in. We should probably put our resources in. I think that
Hawkeye likes to pay for things.
Well, I think just in general,
isn't expert marksman like 2?
Expert marksman is 1 cost, I believe.
Oh, is it 1?
Yeah. Okay. How do you not even know Hawkeye's cards? What is wrong with you? Okay. That's fine. Everything's fine. What else are we thinking here? You need to guide me, Tempo Master.
I need to guide you?
Yeah.
I feel like do you want to lean to some more thwarting here?
I would like more threat removal potential.
So one of the things that could be good if you want to go that route is we can look at, if we're just going to do some more Android stuff, we can look at Vivian as well to kind of blank a crisis or something. Yeah. I think I didn't include her in the Gamora deck, and maybe I should if I was going to go Empower and all this, but I think Vivian's a fantastic kind of tempo thing because it allows you to ignore a thing on the table that is potentially blocking you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a good include. And so that allows us to potentially use that with other allies that can thwart well for us.
Yeah, what do you think of there?
I think Brother Voodoo is probably great in Hawkeye because aren't all the arrows events?
They are. This helps you summon whatever event you need at the time. It's basically a second proc of Quiver.
Yep. You don't have a lot of tech stuff, right?
No, I think that would be a different build. You could probably do a pretty cool like tech rushy build with repurpose and tech stuff. Yeah. I was wondering about What Doesn't Kill Me. Is that a good card for a tempo deck?
I think it's a reasonable card. I think it lets you do 2 things. It's also great in Rush, obviously, as well.
Yeah, I was thinking between What Doesn't Kill Me and something like Momentum Shift.
Second Wind?
Well, I was thinking between these 2. They have the same ability, basically, right? You have to heal 2 from your hero to trigger them.
I mean, I think What Doesn't Kill Me is better if you can pay for the requirement.
Exactly. Because
Hawkeye has base.
You probably aren't going to use Hawkeye to attack or defend. Or, sorry, to thwart or defend.
It gives you the option, right?
You
it
never
gives
know.
the option to shoot another arrow
Put it in there.
or actually just attack for 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like any Avenger events? Which I guess is just muster courage, right?
I think it's
That
a
might be
little too
expensive.
expensive for us right here. We want to keep that cost curve low.
How much do you want to lean into protection? Like, should we look at more protection allies?
It's not a bad idea. They're generally not great at thwarting, but they can be, right?
Yeah. How much do you care about stuff like what's her name? Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like Starhawk's a reasonable 2 cost.
Mm-hmm.
Because it gives you that extra thwart and attack if you're going to run power of.
If we were going to do pinned, what if we pivoted and did the pin down build you were talking about? Then we can include things like Daredevil to defend against those minions and slowly damage them over time. That doesn't seem like a bad idea. So we should probably put the pin down upgrades in here.
How much do you care about anticipation?
The event or the
Isn't there an upgrade? Yeah, when you get your minion, discard this to ready your hero. It depends on how much you're leaning into, I guess, come get me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at this point we've decided to go with the Come Get Me Bub deck. That likely means we're not doing this Earth's Mightiest Hero stuff, which I think is the right move. Because we only have 2 Avenger allies.
Yeah, the problem with protection is that they don't innately have many Avenger allies, and even basic doesn't.
Yeah, we can always honorary Avenger things, right? We could honorary Avenger.
That's a lot of card commit.
That's a lot of card commit. That seems
that
not
probably
like
not staying
a
around.
tempo move, you know?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I feel like Victor hopefully will stay around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But
what do you think about events like Jump Flip and Sidestep?
I don't mind them.
I don't know if I have the right resourcing to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you pay for the Jump Flip or Sidestep? I mean, I feel like Sidestep, even if you don't get the 1 ping damage, preventing 3 is pretty good. But for some reason with Jump Flip, I really want to get that 2 threat.
That's fair. And Sidestep now has to be from an attack because it's a defense, right? So.
Yep.
It's basically subdue, but sometimes it also does damage.
Yeah, the benefit of subdue is mostly that you can play it on another person and not be the one who takes the attack to the face.
Fair. Let's put Sidestep in there as a 2 of. Go back.
If you go back to allies real quick and you scroll to the bottom, what do you think about the martyr? If you're going to lean into kind of
probably
might be right? Kind of on the like. I think if you're going to get power of production, she might be worth as an include there.
At this point, should we include that before we forget about it?
Sure. Because I think with what doesn't kill me, it allows you to get the requirement for that, and then all your protection allies are 2 or higher.
Correct. I actually think Sidestep's a bad move here because we need a little bit of damage on us to trigger the what doesn't kill me, right?
I'm pretty sure you will be able to get damage.
I mean, no way. Look at all these blockers.
I mean, you're not gonna chump with Daredevil.
That's true. This is true.
Or Victor probably, but maybe. The other option, just to have stuff for you, is do you want Clea as the 2 cost that shuffles in? Thwarts for 1.
I don't know. I feel like sometimes Clea's a bit of a tempo hit because a lot of times I just get 1 thwart and a block out of her, which maybe is worth it. But then she pops up into my hand again, and I tend to replay her again instead of like.
Is it a forced response or is it a response?
It's just an interrupt. Oh, okay.
So you can choose to not trigger it, right?
It's a forced interrupt in my house.
I mean, that sounds like a you problem.
That is a me problem. Do we want Face the Past if we're going ally stuff?
How much do you hate Crossfire?
He does have Quick Strike. But 3 cards in a ready's pretty slick. Especially if I'm going to have like a Daredevil to block him or something like that.
Isn't Daredevil going to take 3 to the face?
Take 2 to the face, right?
2 to the face.
So is your strategy, then immediately remove 1?
I mean, like, another thing, you could do the thing I did, which is like you could face the pass and just pin him down and then never have to deal with him coming back out.
Yeah. I think we want it. I'm a big Face the Pass fan. I love that.
Do you also include him in when you play like Phoenix?
Yeah, totally. It's a really good card. What do you think about Assess the Situation in tempo decks?
They're a future tempo turn.
They are a future tempo turn, but I think that they are... I'm going to put them in because I think they're good.
Do you need more options for your stuff?
What do you mean?
Like, do you want the classic, like, Iron Hearts or Miles or something?
I feel like we have enough allies that we don't need more allies, is my guess. Miles is a good tempo ally just because he lets you pick things, right?
Yeah. And it's a way to get that 3.
But I think we've got enough allies. If I dropped Vivian, I could see bringing Miles in. But I like keeping the cost curve low. Ironheart I can understand, but we've got a pretty good cost curve going already. What's our 4 cost card? One of those allies.
It's Martyr. You could potentially drop Martyr.
Yeah, she's useless. Get her out of here. We don't believe in that here. 2-3 cost cards.
It was just a way to get
like
extra toss or defenses, but I don't know if you need that.
Yeah, that is. It's an option. It's an option.
Do you want another event or a support?
What are you thinking? I got a 1 of. We could go over 40.
Are you thinking about doing any of the Mockingbird shenanigans?
Which Mockingbird shenanigans? Government liaisoning it?
Or Avengers Tower?
I don't know if Avengers Tower is worth it with only Mockingbird. I mean, you do get to recur her.
Yeah.
But at that point, you're better off just getting a helicarrier, right? If we had more Avengers allies, I would say that would be great. But I think with just Victor...
How you get that is by not playing protection.
Yeah, exactly. And Government Liaison doesn't hit enough things for me to think about that.
How many mentals do you have? Not enough, right?
Mentals for what?
I was just thinking, is it worth putting like a Black Widow or something in to deal with treacheries? But maybe you don't want.
That is a good question. I'm going to say no for now.
What is your 1 of card that you're thinking of?
No, I'm trying to figure it out still.
Night Nurse.
Absolutely not. Is that a good card?
It depends on if you like being stunned.
We could always
I feel like Night Nurse is my if I have 1 slot left, she's kind of an auto include.
That does make sense. And she's cheap.
She costs 1, she removes a stun.
We'll Night Nurse it.
Heals you for 1.
I was wondering about Hangar Bay. I don't think it's essential.
I think Hangar Bay...
It lets Victor block 2 minions, or Daredevil block 2 minions or something like that.
Hangar Bay's great with Spider-Man UK.
You know what we need more than Night Nurse is we need an endurance here, I think. We're a 9 hit point hero, and we're planning to use things like Come Get Me Bub to heal, and What Doesn't Kill Me, and that makes me a little nervous. So I think giving ourselves 12 hit points to work with is a little safer. You want Night Nurse back in there? I can put it to 41.
I mean, it's up to you.
We'll include her. First go.
We could drop an ally.
Nah, I think we're good. All right.
Do you need
recap
Starhawk?
the deck here really quick. For people that are listening in audio, this was really good. So we built a Hawkeye Protection tempo deck here that does look fairly similar to the Gamora deck, but a little bit different. So we do have 3 copies of Come Get Me Bub and 1 copy of Face the Past to summon minions. We'll plan to pin those down with 3 copies of Pin Down, or to deal with them with a bunch of allies that are going to take advantage of that, like Daredevil, Victor Mancha, and others.
Or Explosive Arrow.
A bunch of protection allies, so we have Brother Voodoo, Clea, Daredevil, Starhawk, and Victor, along with our What Doesn't Kill Me to give us 8 targets for Power of Protection, which is pretty good. Our cost curve is looking mighty fine, with 2-3 cost cards and everything else being 2 cost or less. We do have a lot of 2 cost cards, but a lot of that is because of our Power Protection targets, and then a lot of our arrows cost 2. Other highlight, I guess, I didn't finish my thought on Assess the Situation. I think Assess the Situation is great for tempo decks because it's a cheap card that gives you a lot more versatility in a future turn. And it's not a future turn 5 turns away like Avengers Mansion might be. It's a future turn the very next turn. So if I have enough board state controlled where I have this 1 leftover card, I don't have to hold on to that card. I can turn that into a 7-card hand size the next turn, because we don't hold on to cards in Kennedy Hawk Tempo Land. We assess the situation correctly and get more money.
You didn't assess the situation to keep the card?
Exactly. I assess the situation to keep a better card in my hand. In general, I also just think that bigger hands give you more choices. So, and especially with a lot of our cards being 2-cost, we like having 6 cards, not 5 cards in hand. So this gives us more opportunity to have those 6-card hero hand sizes without dipping down.
Did you just describe? You just wish you were Spider-Man?
Basically, Spider Hawkeye. It's true. But that's that. That's
Yeah. The only other kind of thought I had was Rogue is a great first tempo kind of ally there for choice.
Why is Rogue a
but
great
she's
tempo
expensive.
ally? She's expensive.
Because you can choose which stat to buff her on.
That's fair. I feel like I like Rogue a lot better when I can keep her out for a long period of time.
I don't know if it's worth including this deck necessarily,
We're
but it gives you
we
choice.
don't want to go above 3 cost. I like your thought pattern, though. It is very good.
And it's like particularly great if you're running stuff like Professor or Nick Fury.
Mm-hmm. When you can ready.
Because not just because of the ready, but also just the like, you don't care about damaging Professor and Nick usually because they're not going to get readied.
Fair.
So like if I'm thwarting, even if I can't heal Rogue, like if she's thwarting for 5 and Professor's also thwarting for 3, feels pretty good, right?
Yeah. I do like Rogue. You're making me question it now too, because she could steal the 3 attack from Hawkeye, and then he can heal it off with what doesn't kill me.
Yes.
But we've already locked in. We've clicked the save button at this point, so Rogue will be sideboarded.
To be fair, you click the edit button.
Well, now I clicked the save button. There. It's doomed now. Damn, we did it. Tempo episode. Any closing thoughts on Tempo? I guess with Char, we had him give us his 60-second elevator pitch on this is what Tempo is and this is why you should play it. Why is it fun? So tell us, what is Tempo and why should we play it?
Yeah, I think, like I was saying before, I think Tempo is the epitome of the design of Marvel Champions, of making the most out of the hand you're getting and not having necessarily the set plan of like, I must play all these things because they're the most expensive card or whatever in my hand. And so I think the benefit of Tempo is it gives you that kind of freedom without being locked into one of those other playstyles of control or rush, and you kind of get to thread that needle. And I think that's super fun to do, and also makes you, I think, evaluate and look at cards in a different way, especially compared to control, which is more common, where you're just trying to hunker down and build up. And so you might look at cards that you may not be considering most of the time. And so it allows you to just play the game in a different way. And maybe also beat scenarios that control is not good at doing.
That's fair.
Then it gives you, I think finally it also gives you the flexibility of like, you can play a tempo deck that you built in control if that's what the situation like warrants, right? Like much easier. I think with those options you can pivot.
Most
or if you need to lean more into rush, like
Tempo.
You can do that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the flexible playstyle.
I love it. We're going to call it a day. We've got one more playstyle on this risk tolerance axis to go through. And we will hopefully get to that in the next episode. Until then, we'll see you. Thanks.